All right, today we're going to be talking about antisocial personality disorder. I'm Ben.
I'm Alec.
Let's get started.
So, antisocial personality disorder is commonly known as the sociopathy disorder. It's used to describe someone technically as someone who has an ingrained pattern of behavior, which they constantly disregard and violate the rights of others around them. To put it simply, they lack emotion and empathy, which is a pretty basic human emotion, and it makes them able to do things that other people might not be able to do. So you see it in a lot of serial killers. It only affects about 3% of the overall population, and it is much more common in men than in women. So, uh, antisocial personality disorder was originally discovered back around the 1920s with some Harvard researchers who were interviewing prison inmates, and they were looking for patterns in their behavior. And they found that many of them were lacking empathy. So eventually, then, between the 1920s and 1980s, there's a lot of discussion and different things going on, and eventually they coined the term antisocial personality disorder, and it was officially added to the DSM-3 in the 1980s. The biggest contributor to antisocial personality disorder was Lee Robbins. She worked with delinquent teens, and she was a psychotherapist. So she sat down and talked to troubled teens about their problems with a lack of empathy and being able to do things and not feel any remorse. So the way the schools of thought would take a look at antisocial personality disorder would be as listed. The behaviorists would look at the environment in which they are in and see how that would influence them to act in the way they do. Humanists would believe that they're acting out as a way of showing their emotion and inner feelings and reflecting how they are on the inside, and they believe that it's malleable and that obviously they're good underneath it all. And then psychotherapists would they'd say, and this is what is most commonly believed now, is that there's some kind of trauma or stressor which made the subject develop the condition. So it's not necessarily genetic or innate, but there's events that are believed to push someone who has this condition to become a quote unquote psychopath.
Now we're going to look at some of the characteristics and symptoms of this disorder. So we'll start off with the criteria that people must meet to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. So firstly, there must be impairments in the personality functioning. That's both self-functioning, so they have an issue with their identity or their self-direction. They don't know where they're going or who they are. And also with their interpersonal functioning, they lack empathy. They are unable to form intimate relationships because of that lack of emotion. Number two is personality traits. Antagonism, which is they're manipulative, they're deceitful, they try to use others to gain instead of just trying to form meaningful relationships, and they also are disinhibited. They're irresponsible, they're impulsive, and they take risks. Number three, these impairments and traits must be stable over time, and they can't be due to outside factors, so head trauma, drug abuse, if they're better explained in normative development or environment, that would also disqualify them from being diagnosed with this. And the last one, they must be an adult. Here are some symptoms for people that have antisocial personality disorder. Obviously, it's the violation of physical or emotional rights of others. They don't care about other people. They can't see it from their side. They also lack stability in job and home life. They're aggressive. They don't show any signs of remorse because they don't feel any remorse. They're irresponsible, reckless, impulsive, deceitful, manipulative, and childhood diagnosis like a conduct disorder. So diagnosis is a little tougher for people with anti-personality disorder, mainly because they don't like to seek help. Many only get help and go get treatment when they are mandated to do so by court order. If they do get treatment, As long as they meet those 5 criteria, and again, all 5 of those must be met, then they can be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. So look at some causes. They're really unknown, but people say it's likely due to a combination of genetic and environmental factors, which is kind of a theme here. It's more common in those that have a role model with the tendencies of antisocial personality disorder. So someone in their life who lacks empathy and does those things. And as Alec mentioned earlier, someone who has a great stressor in their life is more likely to develop antisocial personality disorder. Treatment. Right now, there's not a clear treatment for antisocial personality disorder. The 2 main things are psychotherapy and medication. Psychotherapy can be used to deal with anger and violence management and drug abuse and other symptoms. And the medication clozapine has been shown to improve symptoms in people that have this disorder.
All right, so now finally to wrap things up, we're going to take a quick look at an anecdote. This information was actually obtained from this guy, Andy Brill. He wrote a blog post a couple of years ago, and he was someone who grew up and is diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. So when he wrote it, he was 33 years old and surprisingly had a wife and kids, which he was in love with, and he feels emotion for them. He suffered sexual abuse from my friend's brother growing up, and he was adopted at a very young age with his father drinking and abusing him and eventually killing himself. And his mother was also abusive and not caring. So he had 2 parents that were really not caring for him, especially when he was really young. Looking back, he had no memory of any feelings from his childhood. So any emotion, any kind of empathy. As an adult now, he has no memory of any of that. He was committing some violent acts during high school and eventually was brought to the doctor at 16, and he was diagnosed by doctors, but he was not informed of his disorder, so he had no idea that he had antisocial personality disorder, and he was just told, even in his 20s, that he just had ADHD and he didn't have this problem. So then, when he graduated college, he was living a normal life during the day, acting like a normal person, and he was committing burglary and other grand thefts at life, which eventually led him to being on trial, and I believe even going to prison, which is then when he sought further help and ended up finding out about this diagnosis that he got at 16 fully. So he's kind of a special case, at least compared to a lot of other ones online. But he was able to love his family, and the thing that about him was that he just requires a ton of stimulation to feel any other emotion, and so he's involved in some high danger sports, and he lifts heavy weights. And finally, one thing he said was he doesn't tell anyone about his diagnosis because of the stigma around it, especially known as a psychopath disorder. And a lot of the online information paints a picture of a murderer instead of someone who can live a normal life like him. So this just shows that not everyone is a psychopath who has this disorder. As much as there is a fringe like that, it's also possible to live a normal life with this disorder.
So hopefully you saw some of the characteristics, symptoms in Andy's story, and we hope you've enjoyed this presentation on antisocial personality disorder. Thank you.